Hello, Clint.
How you doing?
Yeah, you're good. I think we are streaming live already to YouTube. Hello, people in YouTube, and we're waiting for Ted, and here comes Ted.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
Right,
I believe we are streaming live.
Oh, you verified that? You see it in YouTube?
Well, I see it on Remo.
Yeah, well, let's go make sure it's on YouTube.
Fine.
Here we go, live now. Here we go, live now. Here we go, live now.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome.
All right, I'm going to have to reload my page real quick, so if I fall out, I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm liking that shirt, Mike.
Hey, it fits.
Hey, Tyler. How you doing?
There we go.
Hey, Kyle. I'm good. I'm underrepresenting today. My apologies.
Yeah, where's your T-shirt?
I know, totally. I don't know who was in charge of picking sizes on that one, but,
It needs a website.
but apparently I look triple or double XL.
I don't know who was in charge of picking sizes on that one. It needs a website.
Oh, can somebody mute their YouTube?
Double XL. I don't know who was in charge of picking sizes on that one. It needs a website.
Is that you, Ted?
That's my mute. Ah, it was Mike. Yeah, you gotta pause or mute your YouTube in your browser, Mike. Okay. So if somebody over on YouTube could let me know that they're seeing everything okay, that would be great, seeing and hearing. All good. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if I can start my slides. Oh, and I need to swap displays. There we go. All right. So, Kyle, are you seeing my slides okay?
Yep, can see him just fine.
Excellent. All right. So thank you for joining us for episode 49 of SEO Fight Club. And I want to thank you for your patience and bearing with us. We're trying to work with a new platform that allows us to network in person before and after the episodes with people who are watching. And if you're on YouTube, you're probably asking yourself, well, how do I get in on that cool networking? And what we do is we go to this URL and you can come join. And so it looks like a conference, and you can double click on tables when we're in the networking portion. While we're presenting, all you can do is see the presentation. So if you want to go direct to the networking, go ahead and feel free to switch over to this URL. I'll leave it up for a minute or two. Kyle, what do you think of this networking platform?
Oh, I'm loving it. It's an opportunity to actually have a real community online where you can not just like text chat with people, but actually have a conversation with them. Because in the platform, you usually sit at a table. It's maximum of 6 per table. And you can actually see and interact and Actually see the people are real people. Clint's a real guy. You can talk to him.
Hey, Clint, can you verify that you're a real guy?
Only on Wednesdays. The AI can
All right, so that's probably enough time of staring at this URL. So if you want to join, you can rewind and pause and type it in if you need to, but we're going to move forward. The next up is we're on Roku. A lot of people don't know this, but if you have a Roku-enabled television or if you have one of those Roku devices, you can actually watch SEO Fight Club from Roku. And it actually helps us because if you subscribe to the SEO Fight Club content, which is free on these devices, and watch it from time to time, it actually helps us syndicate the show worldwide. So if you could do us a favor and at least like check it out and watch, an episode or leave it running in the background if you're not doing anything else, that's a huge favor to us. And it's kind of another experiment. So if you guys help us with this experiment, we'll let you know if we found it, worthwhile for traffic and viewership and things of that nature. So if you have a Roku, help us out and we'll let you know how it goes. Kyle, what do you think of the Roku experiment?
It was actually pretty cool. I found it. You do have to. It is good to type in SEO Fight Club and then find the station. It took me a second to figure that out, but we do need to thank the good folks at American Way Media for putting that together. In particular, Carol and Holzman. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the work that she's put in and her team to produce the show. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and you can find her in the IMG community. So if you want to be on Roku too, feel free to reach out to her. So SEO this week, Clint, what can we expect?
We had a pretty good show this week. We did a site audit, and we actually got to see the results from one of our previous site audits that we did and some of the recommendations as well. So that was a good time. And the news stories were a little light, but it was fun just talking about those, in particular the featured snippet changes that happened and some testing that was showing the negative effects of the change, and then I'll be looking for some testing to show positive effects. So that was pretty fun.
How are people responding to the new format? And remind our audience about the new format.
Yeah, I changed the format because it was getting a little bit tedious with just the new stuff. And then having you there and not leveraging your experience seemed a little kind of a waste of time. And plus, I like doing the site audit. So we do 3 or 4 news stories now, and then we transition over into site audits, either ones that viewers have volunteered or ones that I've found. And I kind of changed the markets and the niches and the site styles up too, just so we can get some different perspectives. So the one where we actually got results, that was a job site. Ted and I made some recommendations. The owner actually implemented it, and it increased his conversions like 25% just off of some of the changes. So it's cool to see people implementing that stuff and learning from it at the same time, which is kind of the value out of that. So I had fun.
Yeah, I love the new format. How can people reach out to you if they want to be on the show and get an audit?
If you're an IMG, you can find me there, PM me, or on Skype, clint.a.butler. Send me your site there on Skype. Either way works.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out this show, it is absolutely awesome. One of my favorite shows on the internet. Please do check it out, and please do subscribe. We count on you subscribing to our shows to get the features that make producing shows even easier and more effective. So please do subscribe. So Internet Marketing Gold, if you haven't heard about it, it's our community. Clint also has a community, SIA. IMG is a community where like-minded professionals can get together and share experiments and get alerts on updates and Q&A and articles and video and courses and chat and AMAs. Networking like the Remo and a marketplace that's about to open. We're 1,500 members and growing with a combined 4,000 years of SEO experience, which is pretty cool since the industry is only 20 years old. So come join us for free and kick the tires. Let us know how we're doing. And just recently, after the IMG launch, we had 2 winners from the community who got all expense paid accommodations and food and drink at the Phoenix Open. Kyle, how did that event go?
I don't remember much of the event. I was quite intoxicated until about Saturday. That's a bit of a blur. All kidding aside, I had a great time. It was really great to meet Mike and Tyler, and I think we had a lot of fun at the tournament and hanging out the night before, and then also the dinner that we had. I thought was a blast as well. I'd like to ask the guys, how was it? First of all, was it real? Did you actually go to the Phoenix Open?
There was
So we have Mike and Tyler here with us, so they're actually going to tell us about how it went, right?
Of course. Yeah, Mike,
Yes.
you go first. How was it?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can honestly say these guys are real guys, and they're really fun. They're really caring a lot about their community. So there's, as far as IMG is concerned, there's a very bright future with these guys. There's a lot of great ideas that they have for the community, and I really look forward to being a part of it. And I went down there, not knowing if this contest was a scam or, my wife was like, how well do you know these guys? And I was like, well, not very well, other than chatting a few times online here and there and watching some videos that they do. So I went down, a little on guard, and I was like, well, we'll see what these guys are all about, and I can honestly say I went down there with the agenda, I guess you could call it, to get to know them on a personal level and find out, what makes them tick and all that. And they're the real deal. So I'm going to be posting a blog post later today talking all about that and a lot about community and everything. So
What site's that going on, Mike?
that's going to go on my site at itdwebdesign.com.
ITD web design?
Correct. And
ITDwebdesign.com.
Share the link in the community, right?
yes, I'm actually going to do a video addressing the community specifically as a follow-up to it. So probably as soon as I'm done with this, I'll start working on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would echo that. So I'd say at the same time, it was absolutely real, although there was my driver and said, please don't hurt me. Don't drop me into a riverbank somewhere. I snapped a picture of him just for that last moment to be like, I'm going to text this to my wife and make sure this is legit, because it was a, you move from a position of being like, I think this is a total made up statistic, but you move from a position of being like a 90%, 95% of the SEO community is 100% lurker. Like you sit on these things, you take in information. There's a general anxiety about kind of sticking your hand up and try to put forth your ideas for criticism, things like that. And so when you get a chance to meet folks, you're literally, just not sure how that's going to go. And so there's a little anxiety there associated with that. And I think most people, as you're kind of coming up in the SEO world, would feel that. And so, yeah, there was a moment there right at the end where I was like, all right, this is where we're committing. I'm getting into a car with a strange person I've never met, going somewhere I don't know where we're going. But the event was really cool. And the guys were even better. Kyle Roof, I think I'll I'll never forget when you walked into the restaurant the first time. Kyle had been at the Phoenix Open all day long with his staff or whatnot. And so similar to your comments earlier, you came in on drink. I don't know. I don't even know what the count was at that point, but literally it was probably the biggest smile for maybe with the kindest guy you can imagine, walking in, gave you a big bear hug. And I was like, all right, this is going to be amazing.
Did you learn anything? Did you get any value?
Yeah. Ted is 6'4". So
I'm a tall guy.
I can't describe the first time I stood next to Ted Kubitis and I look up and I was like, oh my gosh, you are like a man's man. And so he's a big fella. And so that was, probably one of my biggest takeaways from the event was just
Ted's size.
the sheer.
I'm glad we flew you out.
I was really more impressed that he actually shaved before meeting us.
Yeah.
He didn't show up with the scruffy beard.
Yeah, no, I was on my best behavior.
Yeah, no, I took away a ton of insight though too. I mean, and I think one thing that was really cool about it is we were able to kind of span the expanse of what it means to be in the industry. So from Kyle, I feel like you guys were given tons of stuff I didn't anticipate around coursework and how to grow and implement and manage email lists and things like that. The sides of the business that if folks are primarily agency side, maybe you don't get as much. All the way through to like, hey, here's how many links, might be included at a certain package size associated with a certain dollar amount and things like that. So we really spanned everything, and I have notes for days. So.
How about you, Mike? Did you have any takeaways?
I had a lot of takeaways. My takeaways were more on the business side rather than SEO in general. I already knew because of the community, I had access to you to ask all those SEO related questions. So I didn't, ask a ton of questions as far as that goes. Tyler had a lot of questions that he came a little more prepared than I did. And it was great listening to you guys interact with him and answer those questions. And there was a few times I was like, wait, what? And clarify that. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I did learn a lot, simply because Tyler was asking a lot of those questions where I was asking more questions related at a more of a top level agency ownership level. And got some really great advice. And I came back absolutely inspired and ready to implement some things that I learned. And I want to thank you guys for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mike went to get to know you guys. I went to fleece you for your knowledge. That's what it felt like for 2 days.
Any and all questions, that's what it was.
It was
awesome. Well, thanks again. It was really great meeting you guys. I had a blast. I had really so much fun. And the Phoenix Open, I think we saw approximately 4 golf balls the whole time. but that was great.
It was the best time at a golf tournament not watching golf ever.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome event. I love being there. I kind of felt like we were the contest winners.
Yeah, for sure. It was just a blast.
So at this point in the show, I'm going to ask the speakers who aren't speaking to disable their camera and microphone, and that should hopefully maximize the presentation for the YouTube stream. You are welcome at any time to turn on your microphone and camera to ask questions. But then after your question, just turn off your camera and mic again so that we can maximize the presentation. Sound good? I'll assume that's a yes because everybody turned off their microphone and camera. All right, so moving on. So our topic is the Google Update Storm. And I'm calling it an update storm because in January, there were at least 5 noteworthy updates that we could measure and report on, and we're hitting people. And so what we're looking at here is an aggregate SEO weather report. And so we got Rank Ranger, Advanced Web Ranking, Cognitive, SERPworks, Bright Local, and then our own homegrown IMG weather tool. And so these primary weather tools, most of these are looking at fluctuations of rankings and the search results. Now, our tool is new and different. We're looking at tells that Google is doing large-scale deployments across their server farms. So our goal is to try to predict when those updates are coming, get a little bit of advance notice. Whereas these other weather reports, which are awesome, I'm not knocking them. I love these services. These guys aren't predicting the tornado. These guys are counting the number of devastated homes after the tornado. So what you can see is the green line is our IMG. We start to see this deployment activity. We're like, whoa, now we think there's going to be some ranking fluctuations. And then to follow, boom, there's a bunch of chaos. And again, oh, here's a lesser deployment, but we think there's going to be some fluctuations. And then boom, there's some chaos. And again, ranking, some deployment stuff followed by ranking fluctuations. So we like comparing our results to all of these other SEO weather services because they help us verify our ability to predict. And so that's what we're doing. But then on top of that, Google is doing some announcements. They're giving us some context to what we're seeing in this data. So when we look at this data, we can see, oh, here's the January core update being deployed. Then Google announces it, they flip a switch, and bam, here's a bunch of ranking devastation. And then they announce their feature snippet update. And then a bit later, they did a partial rollback on some of that behavior. They announced an HTML update where they deployed the mobile look and feel to desktop. And then a few days later, they rolled it back. And lo and behold, there's this other update. We don't know what's in it. It's an unnamed update, but clearly there was some ranking fluctuation that was seen across the board. And so January was a very complicated month. And so what ends up happening because of this is people come to me and they'll say, hey, Ted, what changed in the update? And it's like, that's the most loaded question on earth because a lot changed in the updates. It wasn't one thing. And to really understand what you might have seen or what you might be experiencing, I have to unpack a lot of events to make sense of the January updates. So any thoughts on that so far? Don't forget to activate your mic.
Sorry. I've been having a lot of fun actually doing exactly this kind of analysis, watching the early update morning and then seeing the weather happen afterwards. But the coolest thing was the core update in January, and that we got a prediction about 48 hours early because we got it on the Saturday, and then Google confirmed it on the Monday.
Yeah. So we're still learning. We're not experts at this. We're kind of fumbling our way through figuring out how to do this. But what's so amazing is that this is technically possible. Google has tells that they're deploying an update, and Google has different types of updates that we can recognize and detect. And so it's kind of the Wild West where, historically weather, SEO weather was just, did the rankings fluctuate? But now we can actually look at Google and detect things, and it's so much more detailed. It's a much more, rich amount of information that we're able to look at and analyze. So I will move on. So in January, there were 3 types of updates in there. We had an algorithm update, we had a meta search blending update, and we had an HTML update. And so the algorithm update was that core 2020 update, which affects, what factors influence your rankings. It's evaluating the content type of update. What makes you relevant? What makes you authority? What's trustworthy? What's not? Those are algorithm updates. Now, the meta search blending update is going to require a little more thinking on your part, because Google is actually a meta search engine. There are multiple search engines with different algorithms. And when you conduct a search on Google, it's going to blend the results of those multiple searches into what you see as the search results, the default search results. And some of the search engines that we're seeing combined for your search query is ad search, local search, organic web search, related searches, the featured snippet and knowledge graph, shopping search, image search, news search. And based on the meta search blending, it will pick and choose from those various search services to blend results together to make a search result page. When Google changes the rules for how those different searches are blended together, that is a meta search blending update. And in this particular case, that update was when they changed the rules for the featured snippet to say whenever the featured snippet is chosen, that website is no longer allowed to be on page 1 of the organic web results. And so based on how they're blended, it affects how you appear in a different related search. So that's a meta blending update. And then there was the HTML update where Google changed the desktop presentation of the search results to be the same as mobile. And then they subsequently rolled it back later. So starting with that HTML update, because I think it's kind of the simplest one to unpack. The problem with these HTML updates, where they change the look and feel of the search results and how the HTML is coded, is that they tend to break SEO tools and oftentimes rank trackers. And so when they make these changes, all of a sudden those rank trackers don't pick up the search results, and they come back saying you have wide sweeping ranking losses. When in fact, absolutely nothing has changed on Google's side. If you go and check manually, you still have the same rankings, but your tools are telling you you have wide sweeping losses. So one of the hazards of these HTML updates is you need to understand that you need to check your rankings manually whenever you have wide sweeping losses. And then when they rolled back the look and feel, that technically counts as a second HTML update, because any of the tools that adapted to the new look and feel are broken again because of the rollback. And so you might have thought you had wide sweeping losses when in fact nothing was different.
We recently saw this problem with Google doing a lot of A/B testing over the past week and a half with the favicon displays. So it really has affected a lot of rank trackers, and because they're doing A/B testing back and forth, it's been a lot of confusion in all those rank trackers. So that's a good point, checking everything manually.
Yeah, yeah. And specifically losses. Like if you have losses that you're prepared to freak out about, check those manually. You can trust your gains if Google's, if your rank tracker is saying, hey, I'm measuring you in the number 2 spot, odds are you're probably in the number 2 spot. But it's when, all your websites have vanished, you need to double check those manually.
Well, and it's good to be able to update your clients that you're doing SEO work for too, because now you have an early warning system. We can kind of give them a heads up and say, hey, we're monitoring it. And it kind of puts them at ease that you're more on top of things when that happens.
Yeah, yeah. And it's never good to be caught off guard going, I don't know why our pages are, fluctuating. It's good to have an answer ready. So the meta search blending update. And so, we went over that Google's a meta search engine, and that when they changed the rules for how they blend multiple searches into one result page, that, that's what these updates are. And the specific meta search blending update was, when Google said that websites selected for featured snippet cannot appear on page 1 for organic web search. Later, they relaxed that a little bit, if my understanding is correctly, and that featured snippets and the sidebar are now exempt from that. So it's only the top featured snippet that gets filtered, but sidebar featured snippets aren't. So you may want to double check. If you saw original losses, you may want to double check that again. It might not be as bad now. So reevaluate where you stand again.
Ted, I've noticed though that it's not consistent. Some things are still gone from that are in the sidebar. And also some of the top featured snippets, you're on the top of page 2, but some of them are completely gone. It's a real mix right now.
Yeah. I would guess that the people making the announcements about this particular update probably don't know the whole rule set, or probably aren't able to share the whole rule set. And so, there's probably a lot of edge cases. It might only affect high volume keywords. It might not affect low volume keywords. We just don't know the rules.
I think also they might not know what they're doing either. Would just be another thing to toss out.
Yeah.
Somebody pulled the lever here and somebody turned the knob over there, and God only knows what comes out.
And then on the algorithm side, we can actually use our tools to look at, the way things were before the core update and the way they are now after the core update, and tease out some clues on what's different. So in this particular case, I have a calibration keyword. I have a number of calibration keywords, but one that I typically share publicly. And we use these calibration keywords because we have websites in them that will never change. We control them so we know they never change. And we can make sure that our tools are getting the correct readings based off of those calibration websites. And because we're in these keywords all the time, we have a rich history of historic data for these calibration keywords. And we're very comfortable with the players and who should be ranking where because we check them all the time. This is one of those calibration keywords, DUI lawyer, Los Angeles. And I am comparing which factors were the strongest factors back in December 23rd to what's the strongest factors in February 3rd. And so I just wanted to get the ones with the most movement. So there's more on the list than this that moved a little bit up and down, but these are the ones that moved a lot. And those are what I'm interested when I try to figure out what was this algorithm update about. And so we can see that entities and sentences, entities and H2 tags are new to the field. And so it's cool to see those moving up in the rankings. They confirm what a lot of other people are seeing with entities. Term frequency is up, so you're on page. And we see that sentiment for free in the title is up, but having the word best in the title is down. That's interesting because Yelp and other directories are notorious for the top 10 best lawyers in Los Angeles being pegged at the top. So seeing that trend down is an interesting turn of events. Keywords in your Open Graph site name, that's an interesting one. And then, of course, your H2, your heading 2 tags, both the number of tags and keywords in those tags being more important. That's a very interesting trend. I would not have expected that. So again, very, very interesting just on this one keyword that we look at a lot for calibration. But what I also like to do is to look across thousands of keywords and see how those patterns change. So here we are looking at one specific example we know very well. And when we go broad, now we're looking at the top correlating factors across tens of thousands of keywords. And we're looking at what tends to be the most broadly applicable. So when we look at the percentages over here, what percentage of those thousands of keywords was this factor applicable to? Some of this, like this small one, looking up the SpyFu data costs money. It's the same as money, so not a lot of people are doing it because it costs cash to get that data, and that's why this is so small. If we had more people doing it, it would have a much higher percentage. Same thing with the Ahrefs. About 20% of the Cora users are running the Ahrefs API, so it kind of pegs at 20%. If more people did it, these numbers would be much larger. And then, of course, the on-page ones, everybody has those enabled, so they tend to be very applicable across the whole sample set when they correlate strongly. And so what's interesting here, what's raising eyebrows this month, the paid results, the AdWords budget. Seeing those things correlating raises eyebrows. And so this is something we're watching. I'm not ready to claim that Google is optimizing for ad revenue yet, but it's very suspicious that these would correlate with rank position in Google. Some things are obvious, so seeing that your backlinks, your referring IP addresses, referring domains makes a lot of sense. It looks like it had an uptick in recent months, so it seems to be stronger than it used to be. LSI words and their usage, that's an interesting thing to see both in the sentences of the content and in the title tag of the page being the hot zones that are correlating. So that's pretty interesting.
Ted, do you think the use of those third-party services could be skewing the results? I.e., if I'm using SpyFu, let's say I have SpyFu connected and I'm using it. Obviously, I'm using it on terms that are probably having a spend, right? So now that AdWords spend is going to show up, or some of my markets that I may be doing require a lot of backlinks to rank because the competition is using a lot of backlinks to rank, which skews the Ahrefs stuff. So do you think that has an effect on how that should be looked at?
It's possible. Like there are a number of things that could affect what we're seeing. Like Ahrefs, for example, I've seen them and SEMrush kind of go up and down in these leaderboards. And sometimes that motion is tied to when they do large updates to their database of information. So if they get a whole lot more backlinks in their database, then all of a sudden it may correlate more with rankings in Google. So there are events like that that can influence it. So you have to take the correlations with a grain of salt. But again, correlation is not necessarily causation, but causal things tend to correlate. So you have to keep those things in mind and think about your situation. Like, for example, a lot of people do a lot of on-page and neglect off-page, and this is some solid data that you probably don't want to neglect your off-page. You probably want to do both.
Ted, I think that's the next question that people have. When you see something like LSI words here in this and then entities on the other one, what should they do? What's the first step then when you see these things moving up or perhaps correlating more towards rank? What would be the first thing that they should do?
Well, the thing you need to keep in mind is that the information you're seeing here, previously was for a very specific niche. And this one is very broadly to, thousands of different keywords averaged together. And what you're going to want to find is what factors are important for your keyword and for your page. And the degree of tuning you need for each specific factor changes from keyword to keyword. So I would recommend getting data that is specific to your keyword. You can do that through my software. You could do that through Fiverr. You could do that through other software. But get data that's specific to your website and your keyword and find out how you're different than your higher ranking competitors. What we tend to find is that people that fix their deficits compared to their higher ranking competitors tend to fare better in Google updates, and they tend to rank better, and they tend to rank with less link building. If your on page is really dialed in, you tend to not need as much link building to get to where you want to be. That's a reoccurring pattern that I've seen for years now. How about you?
What I like to do is when I see these things that are trending, so LSI and entities, I'll run Cora and I'll run Pop, and I'll specifically look at those things first. And if I have deficits in those things, that's what I'll address first before doing anything else.
Yeah, and I often tell people to knock out a handful of the easy ones.
Yep.
Don't try to knock out the whole list in one sitting. You'll trigger an extreme Google dance, and you'll knock yourself out of the SERPs for 2 weeks waiting for Google to reevaluate everything. Do a handful of small changes, get a little boost. Do a handful of small changes, get a little boost. What do you think, Clint?
That's typically how I implement it. I was thinking, and the reason I'm thrown off a little bit is I was thinking that what if you recommend go out and find the correlations and stuff, and then you show this with the third-party integrations. But let's say I don't have SpyFu or I don't have Dom Detailer. Is that a recommendation that you have that they should at least run one, or is it okay not to not run any, and then you focus on the on-page results, understanding that you got to do backlinks at some point?
Yeah, well, what you'll find when you only do the on-page and you don't use these other services for off-page information is you typically get to a point where your efforts to rank better stop yielding returns. So at first you're like, whoa, I put a bunch of content and keywords on my page and I shot out 14 spaces. And so I went back and I did some more and I shot up, 3 spaces. And then I went back and I did some more and I didn't move at all. Well, that's because there's more to the story that you're not seeing. And you need to get a broader view of how you're different to figure out what else you need to do. And so these other services, they have different information. They have different data sets. They can give you clues as to how else you might be different. And then, of course, ultimately, there may be factors we don't know about and don't measure that Google's using. So we never quite know everything Google's doing, but we're to a point where we're measuring thousands of possible factors and figuring out which ones are the likely suspects using correlation and mathematics.
Ted, I got a quick question here too.
Sure.
It might be a pivot here, but if anybody's not familiar, those top three with referring IP, Class C, and the domains, is that effectively kind of the same metric? I mean, it's referring domains, just get referring domains.
Yeah, they're kind of the same things. They're different ways of slicing up backlinks. But the interesting one of those three to me, the one that really captivates me, is the referring domains, because Google went out of their way to report on that in the old Search Console. It was, there was only 2 or 3 reports in the old Search Console, and referring domains was one of them. And they wouldn't have built it if they weren't using it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fascinating too, because as you on here with the Ahrefs domain rating as a whole too, this would suggest, and help me fill in the gap here if I'm missing it, but this would suggest that to some degree it might be more about just the number and the diversity of them as opposed to potentially the strength of them. Is that a possible conclusion from what we're looking at?
Well, these are in order of their correlation strength. So we can see over here that they're clearly sorted with the strongest correlations at the top, and they get progressively weaker. But again, because we're looking at, what changed in the update, I'm only showing you the ones that moved a lot or popped into the list. There's a whole bunch more on this list that are strong correlations, but they didn't move a lot of spaces. These were the big movers and shakers.
Sure. It's a good note, good detail. I think for, when you're in an agency setting or something like that, I feel like you're looking for volume hacks, where you're going, you're trying to figure out how you could most rapidly apply, like Class C addresses to an actionable item. And so it helps to see that kind of correlation aspect might play a higher impact than domain rating. Again, I would have to see the whole chart to see where that falls in on the total list there.
Yeah, and you have to see data specific to a website and a specific keyword. Playing with the averages is usually the incorrect answer. Because when you look at the correlation studies for thousands of keywords, that is perhaps correct for a keyword, but it's most likely not correct for your keyword. And the degree of tuning can vary wildly. Like I've seen for SEO Olympia versus SEO Seattle, they're very similar related niches within the same state, but the competition for ranking for one is much higher than the competition for ranking for another, largely due to Clint Butler. Because he's more active in one of those than another, it really drove up the degree of tuning needed.
Another thing, I think you touched on this a little bit, but it's really important to remember, if you're going to take this data and make actionable items, you need to first know what the data is telling you and start with one thing. And if, like you said, if you start with your on page and make incremental changes, I think that's very important to say, is incremental changes. If you change too much at one time, you don't know what's effectively moving you the most, right? So incremental changes are very, very important for your on page. And then once you've maximized that out, then you can move to building links to take up the rest of the slack.
Yeah, yeah. And before you make changes, find out how you're different. Don't just blindly make changes. Find out, which factors you're short in and work with those first.
Exactly.
So in January, we can kind of summarize, what changed in the updates. What definitely happened is you may have lost page one rankings to the snippet rule change. You might have experienced that. Another thing that definitely happened to people is you might have thought you lost rankings but didn't due to the HTML update and the following rollback. So you might have experienced that in January. Another thing that definitely happened to people is the algorithm update may have affected your rankings. So in terms of relevance and authority, based on the factors that we saw moving and shaking the most, it appeared to be, largely relevance and authority based, backlinks and your keyword usage on page. And things we're watching closely, but we can't really confirm at this time. Entities looks like they're a growing concern. We're seeing those rising in the ranks. And those pay-per-click related factors correlating strongly with rank position in Google is raising eyebrows. So we're watching that more closely. And that's our sport. Do we
Ted,
have
a question from the conference area. Could it be that AdWords is correlating because that way Google knows that you are a real thing, similar to such as like GMB or G Plus or YouTube or other kind of those trust signals within the Google's ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a possible theory, but one that I think needs testing.
And then at one point, Ted had a metric that was measuring a number of optimized ranking factors as the strongest ranking factor.
Yes.
Is that still on the list?
It is still on the list. The thing to remember is that what I was showing you aren't all of the highest ranking factors. I was showing you the factors that move the most. So there's more to those lists, and factor diversity is still near the top of the list. It just didn't move a lot with this update. It is still a strong player, and it hasn't changed. And yes, having more factor diversity, eliminating your factor deficits helps you a lot. That pattern has shown to be true.
Hey Ted, I've got a question with your data. You're showing which ones move the most. Like Ahrefs data was at the top. So how would that correlate with the data that you're pulling? How would that correlate if Ahrefs did a massive marketing campaign for their company and just got a crap load of people signing up for their service? Now you've got more users and more data that can be collected. Or maybe they changed something in their algorithm for collecting their data. So how does that work with what you're pulling?
More people using Ahrefs with Cora gives us a bigger sample size, and a bigger sample size is a great thing. We love a larger sample size. And but the thing to keep in mind is that we're correlating those measurements, those factor measurements, with rank position in Google. And we're saying, does having more of this factor tend to lead you to the best rankings? Or does it appear to be random and doesn't affect rankings? Or does it tend to shift you to the bottom? And so we're using math to determine those signals. And so when we say that these are strong correlations, we're saying that having more of this tends to help you rank better. And so when we show you those top factors, we're saying these appear to help you rank better. And these ones got significantly stronger in the recent update at helping you rank better, or at least that's what the math is hinting at. Now, the question is are these actual ranking factors, or are they just things that are closely related to actual ranking factors, so they tend to correlate? And that we don't know for certain. We need to run experiments.
Well, I think it's key to know that we don't know what that sample size is with these commercial companies. So, you know, we know Ahrefs has got a huge user community, where something like SpyFu could be a much smaller sample size. So when you're, for example, the data could move a lot with some real power users that have a sample size of, say, 100 users. But once you maximize that up to 10,000 users, to where some of them are power users, some of them aren't, and they're not frequently updating things or tracking even the correct keywords, I think you have to know how to discern that data that's actually being pulled.
Yeah, absolutely. And we check our data for statistical significance. It wouldn't be on the list without it.
Thanks for the clarification.
Here, let's say if somebody was experienced a ranking loss in January on account of one of these updates, what do you think they should do over the next 30 days to try to uncover what the problem might be, or try to reverse that, or should they do anything at all?
Well, the laziest response would be to look at the lists I just presented, and if there are things on there that you've been actively neglecting or avoiding, I would be inclined to experiment on a page or two with those to see if you can get something to turn around. A better response would be to actually get some data, get the tools, or go on Fiverr to people who have the tools and get the information of how your website is different from your higher ranking competitors. And based on those differences, you can figure out a short-term action plan and a long-term action plan that'll hopefully get you to where you want to be.
So in layman's terms, if you haven't gotten Cora or Pop, you should go find a way to get a hold of it somewhere and get the data specific to your keyword, and take a very direct approach to finding out where you lack compared to your competitors on that particular term specifically.
Yeah, you're going to need information to find out how you're different from the websites that are succeeding, and that way you can compete in those ways as well.
Awesome.
One thing I would add too is that you can look at the sites that won, the sites that moved up, you know, the new batch of winners, and you can run them as though those are your sites and compare that way. So not just that they're in a list of competitors, but look at how they actually are different from the entire group. I like to run my competitors as though it's my site, so I can then see the data from that perspective. I was looking at them to see where they have more than the group, or less in certain areas, or what they might be focusing on, or what might have changed from a previous run. So you can often get a lot of data just by looking at like who arrived and what their site looks at from the perspective of their site.
And I love that, Kyle. How critical do you think having data associated with that data is with those searches as well too? Is that critical to y'all's process of making that analysis?
For us, it's for the backlink data, it's a secondary thing. We rarely run like Cora with Ahrefs on it. What we like to do is we like to do the link building we like to do, you know, and
sure.
Yeah,
I'm not overly concerned about it.
I tend to find that the opportunities, the low hanging fruit that most people are after, tend to be on page because they're quick. But when you run out of those, when you hit diminishing returns with what you can do on page, then it's good to turn on those off-page APIs and get the rest of the story.
I totally agree.
But usually that's not where people start, and usually people don't leave the off-page stuff activated all the time. Clint is one of the few I know who does leave it on most of the time. What do you think, Clint?
What was that? I apologize. That's completely.
Why do you leave the off-page APIs on all the time? Is that a best practice or just something you do?
Well, the Ahrefs stuff really interests me, and because I'm doing so much link building, it's nice to know where I can stop. Like, where's the benchmark? So I like seeing that information. I don't leave it on entirely all the time. There's some cases where I know I'm just going to do on-page stuff, and I just want to save myself some time, and they run faster. But Page Optimizer Pro kind of covers down for that too. And I like having the befores and afters. So if people are reporting the changes, I like being able to use the core diff tool and see what changed. Maybe it's something I can carry over under the rest of my properties or whatever. So that's kind of some of the reasons why I leave that stuff on.
Cool. So any more questions, Kyle?
I think that's it. And I think we've hit an hour.
All right. Well, let me dial back to that URL, and we will network for a bit longer after the show. And if you want to come talk to us and ask questions in person, feel free to hop on. You just double click the tables you want to sit at, and you need a microphone and camera to really engage. It's like attending a conference. You get to network with the people you're sitting with. And we'll hang out for 15 minutes or a half hour as time permits, and we'll answer some more questions. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.